I would like to call to order the teleconference meeting of the Finance-Auditing Committee of Thursday, July 23rd, 2020. Before we begin, please note that this meeting is being recorded. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Thank you. Welcome back, everyone who's still on the line with us. Director Cochran.
Here.
Present. Director Grosboll.
Here for part of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Grosboll. Director Moylan.
Here.
Present.
Yes. Oh, Willie, stop the shouting.
Willie.
Willie is present as well. Okay. Director Yee. Absent. Vice Chair Frederick.
Here.
Present. Chair Sobel.
Here.
Present. And President Farr.
Present.
Present. Thank you. You are a committee of the whole and you have a quorum. You actually have also Director Hill on the line, Director Maston, Rabbit, and Theriault. Now I'm going to confirm the staff on the line. General Manager Dennis Mulligan, you on the line?
Yes.
Thank you. Auditor Controller Joe Wire, are you on the line?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. Chief and Engineer Ava Bauer, are you on the line?
I'm here.
Thank you. And Attorney Madeline Chen, are you on the line?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. Bridge Division Manager Steve Miller, are you on the line?
Present.
Thank you. Bus Division Manager Mona Babauta.
Present.
Thank you. Ferry Division Manager Jim Swindler, are you on the line?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. And Kelly Hopper, Administration and Development Manager, are you on the line?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. That confirms the staff on the line.
Thank you. I would like to remind everyone to mute their phones until after staff's presentations and we open up for director's discussion. If there are questions, the Secretary will call on you accordingly. After the director's discussion, we will ask for any public comment before taking a roll call vote. Each page of the meeting packet is numbered on the bottom right-hand corner for ease of following along. Madam Secretary, would you please introduce the first item?
Thank you, Chair Sobel. Item number 3 is ratification of previous actions by the Auditor Controller. The packet of commitments, ratifications, and investments is before you and begins on page 5. Leslie Murphy's on the line to provide her report. Ms. Murphy, take it away.
Leslie, are you there? She might be muted. Is she on the line? Do you know?
There we go.
Okay. Hi, Leslie.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Excellent. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm glad to be here presenting to you again, albeit virtually. And I must say it's starting to feel a bit like Groundhog Day, not just in my day-to-day life, but in the financial markets now as well. As once again, in the month of June, fixed income yields remain extremely low and equities continue to rally as investors look for earnings essentially wherever they can get it. As we're showing on page 12 of your agenda packet, fixed income yields across the board remained very low during the month of June, with the 2-year U.S. Treasury note ending the month at a yield of just 0.15%. Let's go ahead and flip ahead to page 13 and take a look at the U.S. labor market, because this is something we really haven't touched on in a couple of months. As shown in the chart on the top half of this page, the unemployment rate is showing some improvement. Since spiking in April at 14.7%, the overall unemployment rate has dropped down to 11.1% in the month of June. Now, that improvement has generally been led by net job creation in those industries hardest hit by the COVID-19 pandemic. So looking at the chart on the bottom half of the page, we can see that net job creation was largely driven by the leisure, hospitality, and other services industry, which added about 2.5 million jobs during the month. Now, given that many state and local economies are starting to pause or roll back their reopening process, it remains to be seen whether this fledgling growth will continue. So certainly we are by no means out of the woods when it comes to the labor market, and I think we have a long, steady climb ahead of us. Also, just this morning, continuing jobless claims came out, showing a number of 1.4 million jobless claims for this week. Now, this marks 18 consecutive weeks in which initial claims topped 1 million. And it's also the first week-over-week increase in that initial jobless claims number since late March. Let's go ahead and flip ahead to page 14 of your agenda packet. And I am sorry to say I couldn't find an exact update to the PwC CFO Pulse Survey data that we were looking for. I recall last month I had included a chart which showed business owners' projections of when they think conditions would return to normal. While I couldn't find that exact data point, I did find another data point in that report that's been updated that I thought might be interesting. So this is a survey of CFOs, and they were asked the question, what are your top 3 concerns with respect to COVID-19 returning to the workplace and operating in a changed business environment? Back in April, the top 2 concerns cited were financial impact and a potential global recession. Fast forward to June 11th, and the top concern then was a new wave of COVID-19 infections. And I think what this is really telling us that certainly there is a lot of uncertainty, but the particular pain points kind of change month to month as the coronavirus continues to spread and different concerns spout up. Moving on to page 15 of your agenda packet, in our search for interesting survey materials to present, we came across this survey, which I thought would be interesting as well. So this survey really tries to get at when consumers will feel comfortable returning to some normal activities. So specifically, U.S. adults were asked when they'd feel comfortable engaging in some of the following activities right now. So looking at things like going out to eat, going to the movies, going to the gym, and going on vacation. And what the data is telling us is that between April and early June, week by week, consumers are feeling a little bit more optimistic about returning to these quote-unquote normal activities where they'd come in close contact with others. But now, given the new wave of infections and the increasing wave of infections really across the United States, consumers are now turning more cautious. So it kind of feels like a 2-step forward, 1-step back situation. So now let's switch gears a little bit and flip back to page 19 of your agenda packet and talk a little bit more about how PFM is managing your portfolio and how we're changing and kind of responding to market conditions. So as we had mentioned back in March, PFM's credit committee took a very conservative stance and halted the purchase of any new non-government securities because the financial markets were so stressed. But since then, the credit committee has been systematically reassessing every single issuer on our approved list and has now reapproved purchases of a large percentage of our issuers, particularly focused on large, well-capitalized names for purchase these days. So markets have also calmed significantly. Investors have gained more comfort, especially over the Fed's commitment to buy corporate bonds, essentially backstopping that market. So because of that return to normalcy in the market, we have been given a green light to resume purchases of non-government securities. So we took advantage of that in early June as we purchased an Amazon corporate note at a nice pickup relative to U.S. Treasuries. Flipping back to page 21 of your agenda packet, your portfolio, of course, remains in compliance with both California government code and your investment policy, and it remains well diversified by both sector and issuer. You will notice a higher than normal allocation to LAIF at 25%. That's because LAIF continues to offer a yield advantage relative to individual security purchases, but this is something that our portfolio management team is going to continue to keep our eyes on because we do anticipate that the LAIF yield will continue to fall as some of the older, higher yielding securities in that portfolio roll off. So with each maturity, we'll make an assessment of whether it's best to leave those monies in LAIF or to purchase new individual securities. And of course, all of our activities are guided by our overarching objective to maintain both the safety and the liquidity of your holdings with us. And that is the end of my prepared comments for this morning. Happy to entertain any questions.
Wonderful. Thank you, Leslie. Are there any questions for Ms. Murphy? I don't hear anybody, so That concludes the discussion on this item. Before we take our vote, is there anyone from the public wishing to speak on this item, or any, I suppose, follow-up questions for Ms. Murphy?
We're going to pull the
You've
line
been
now. Thank
muted.
you.
Is there anyone
Unmute
who wishes
yourself.
to speak on
Press
this
the star
item?
key twice.
Okay, thank you.
Mute off.
I take it nobody is interested in speaking on the item?
That's correct.
Perfect. Thank you, Leslie. Have a good day.
Thank you.
All right.
You too.
Okay. Bye now. We'll move on with the motion and the vote. Vice Chair Fredericks, would you please move the item?
I move the item.
And Director Cochran, would you please second the item?
I'll second the item.
Wonderful. Madam Secretary, would you do the roll call vote, please?
Thank you. I just want everybody to know that you are back to a committee. Director Groswell has left the call, so I'm just going to do the standing committee members as a roll call. So I'm going to start with Director Cochran.
Yes.
Yes. Director Groswell. Absent. Director Moylan.
Yes.
Thank you. Director Yee. Absent. Vice Chair Fredericks.
Yes.
Thank you. Chair Sobel.
Aye.
Aye. And President Parr. President Parr, are you still there?
I was muted. Yes.
Thank you.
Great.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. The next item is agenda item number 4A, to authorize a budget increase relative to professional services agreement number 2017 D30. That's the Centerfield Transportation Center Relocation Analysis, Environmental Clearance, and Preliminary Design. The staff report can be found on page 27, and Kelly Hopper will present the report. Ms. Hopper, would you begin, please?
Good morning. As I mentioned in the Building and Operating Committee just a few minutes ago, we are looking to increase the budget for this contract relative to increased outreach and increased environmental clearance process. The original scope of work required the consultant to bring forward environmental screening of one preferred alternative. However, due to intense public outreach, as well as the input from various stakeholder agencies, staff believes it is a prudent course of action to actually bring all three alternatives for the permanent relocation of the Centerfield Transportation Center forward through the environmental scanning process. As a result, while the work scope does not change, the work efforts and resources will change in that they need to bring three alternatives and vet all of those forward. As a result, it's going to require an increase in the amount, so we're asking for approval of Amendment B in the amount of $577,421, as well as a new project contingency fund in the amount of $264,263, which would bring the total revised project budget to $2,906,893. I'm available to answer any questions.
Yeah, that's a big gulp, but we'll entertain any questions anybody has for Ms. Hopper. Hearing none, that concludes the discussion on this item. Before we take our vote, is there anyone from the public wishing to speak on this item?
We're going to pull the public line now.
Thank you.
We have no speakers on this item.
Very good, thank you. Vice Chair Fredericks, would you please move the item?
I move the item.
Great, and Director Groswell has left the building. May I get a second from someone, please?
I'll
I'm
second.
seconding item.
Wonderful, thank you. Madam Secretary, please do a roll call vote if you would, please.
Thank you. Director Cochran?
Yes.
Yes. Director Groswell? Absent. Director Moylan?
Yes.
Yes. Director Yee? Absent. Vice Chair Fredericks?
Yes.
Yes. Chair Sobel?
Aye.
Aye. And President Parr?
Yes.
Thank you. The motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. Moving on to item 5A, it's to authorize filing an application with the Metropolitan Transportation Commission for fiscal year 2021 Transportation Development Act State Transit Assistance and Regional Measure 2 operating funds to support bus, ferry, and paratransit services. The staff report is on page 31, and Mr. Wire will present his report. Please go ahead, Joe.
Thank you very much to all. Yes, the report just read by our chair. Just a reminder, the State Transit the Transportation Development Act is what we commonly refer to as TDA. The State Transit System is the STA, and then the operating regional measure 2 funds we usually refer to as RM2. So that's what you've probably seen in a lot of our reports: TDA, STA, and RM2. Another reminder is TDA is sales tax money, and it comes to us through the local counties we serve. And then STA is gas tax money, and RM2 are other bridge tolls. In other words, not the Golden Gate Bridge District, but the 7 state bridges in the Bay Area. And so we get something from them, and then we use those funds to, for example, to run the Route 40 that goes over the Richmond Bridge. And the reason that's important, this is a yearly item. Every year we approve it. It's usually pretty pro forma. In fact, we just pass it. This particular year, it's important to take a look at it because of the chart that's on the last page in your packet. That's page 32, last page of this item. And that we're expecting to receive about $17 million. And that's because those and instead of last year, we almost received approximately $29 million. So it's an $11 million reduction. And that's primarily based on those funding sources that I mentioned have all been reduced by the economic activity surrounding COVID. The gas tax is down because of usage. Sales tax is down because people aren't shopping and buying. And of course, the bridge traffic was down on the regional bridges also, which brought in less money. And so those are estimates of what we believe we will receive. Hopefully they won't be reduced further. That will remains to be seen based on the activity that happens. To put that in perspective, transit has in the district is about $150 million budget between bus and ferry. So this would be even in a good year, 7-8% reduction, of course, for the resources. So it would be a significant hurdle. Obviously, this is just a small part of a much larger hurdle we'll talk about later in the meeting, but it's a significant hurdle for the district. Having said that, it is $17 million. It is for transit, or almost 18. It is for transit, and so we urge your passing. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Thank you, Joe. Are there questions from directors on this item?
Director Maston here. Yes, I have a question.
Yes, please.
Yeah, are we not entitled to STA from Sonoma County?
We are not. The relationship that entitled is a tough word, and I would leave that to the lawyers. But the relationship that was negotiated between the parties years and years ago, probably now close to 40 years ago, laid out that the district would receive 25% of the TDA revenue from Sonoma County. And it's been very good for the district over the years, at least from a financial standpoint. Occasionally it is brought up for discussion by the parties in Sonoma County, but as you can see by the age of it, it has weathered all those discussions since then.
Okay.
So it's if I may jump in, it's a political deal, and when we reviewed it the last time with the other agencies, it seemed still to be an appropriate and prudent compromise among the monies that are available for transit in Sonoma County among the various operators in Sonoma County.
Okay, thank you for now.
Very good, Jim. That, if there's nobody else then that has a question, that would conclude the discussion on this particular item. Before we take our vote, is there anyone from the public wishing to speak?
Thank you. Give me 1 second to pause the call so I can check. We have no speakers on this item.
Okay, thank you. So hearing none, then Vice Chair Fredericks, would you please move the item?
I so move it.
Thank you. Director Moylan, would you please second the item?
I second the item.
All right. And does your wonderful dog want to third the item? Well, we'll move on. Okay, Madam Secretary, please do a roll call vote.
Thank you, Director Cochran.
Yes.
Thank you. Director Grosboll. Absent. Director Moylan. Aye. Director Yee. Absent. Vice Chair Fredericks.
Yes.
Yes. Chair Sobel.
Aye.
Aye. And President Parr.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Motion passes 5-0.
Great, thank you. Moving on to item 6, to authorize execution of the Fourth Amendment to contract number 2011 MD1, Armored Carrier Collection Services with Brinks, Incorporated. The staff report is on page 33, and Mr. Wire, would you give us your report, please?
Thank you. As you said, this is the Fourth Amendment to this contract for Armored Carrier Collection Services. This contract serves both bus, ferry, the TBMs, and the bridge location where we have machines, AVM machines. These monies are picked up, taken to the Brinks headquarters, counted, and then deposited on the district's behalf. The reason we are extending this contract is that we are in the process of finalizing the implementation of an award that the district awarded a year ago for new ticket vending machines, TVMs. When that is done, that TVM vendor will take on the cash collection out of those machines, and that will greatly reduce the district's need for this service. It will still need the service, but at a very different level. We don't know exactly when all that rolls in. That's why you see the structure that is here. We have a 1-year contract with some 12 one-year extensions afterwards. And that's why gives us that flexibility to be able to redesign it if we still need some service or put out that new smaller service if we decide to do that. If there are any further questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Oh, thank you for that report. Questions for Joe on this item? Not hearing any. Is there anyone from the public wishing to speak on this item?
We will pull the comment line now. We have no speakers on this item.
Very good. Then Vice Chair Fredericks, would you please move the item?
So moved.
And I don't think Director Yee is on, so if we could get somebody to second, that would be great.
Second that.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Secretary, would you do the roll call vote, please?
Thank you. Director Cochran.
Yes.
Yes. Director Grosboll. Absent. Director Moylan.
Yes.
Yes. Director Yee. Absent. Vice Chair Fredericks.
Yes.
Thank you. Chair Sobel.
Aye.
Aye. And President Parr.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Motion passes 5-0.
Great. Thank you. Item 7 on the agenda is a status report on the fiscal year 2021 budget. A brief staff report is on page 35. And Joe, would you begin your report on that, please?
Thank you very much. Yes, I will. This was in response to this committee's request to be kept apprised of our progress as a group in balancing the 2021 budget. As you remember, the budget was presented to you, and you passed it and the board passed it with the very large job left over that said that things had happened so quickly and the change in our revenues happened so quickly and demand for our service that we needed to take a little bit of time to figure out what we needed to do in order to either reduce expenses or increase revenues, or a little of both, in order to make up the $98.2 million difference between those two numbers that was projected in that budget that was passed. And then what we discussed was that a report would come back to the committee each month. This is the first edition of it, and we are absolutely open to comments on how to improve it or change it, and that report would at least track our progress. So with that, if you look at the simple table that's on page 37 of your board packet, or committee packet, sorry, that's what we got. First, I'd like to just take a look at the table itself. It's just on the far left-hand side is a column of description. Then you've got, moving to the right, you have your annualized value. That's what we think the value of that change would be for a full year. And then you have the next column to the right is the change as it applies to the budget, because the value of it for a full year may not necessarily be the same as the budget, because the budget could have already made assumptions based on that issue. And then lastly was the farthest to the right is the cumulative amount. At the top of that column, you'll see the top right-hand part of that column, you'll see the $98.2 million. That was what was in the budget. And as we go down that column, the idea is in a couple of months, we'd want that bottom of that column to project to zero so that we'd balance the budget. And as you can see on this one, we're halfway there, a little more. So then we'll talk a little bit about what the items are in this, so you can tell what we've put in so far. And the idea was, if you remember in our discussions, was that because of the CARES Act money that was provided to the district through the regional, through MTC, that the district projects that money will last us into the end of August, into the middle of September, is what we hope. And it may be a little bit longer, obviously, because the district is making attempts to streamline and to reduce its expenses in significant ways to try to stretch the dollar farther. And we'll keep reporting on that as we get closer. So if you look at this table, the board action, when the district brought the budget, staff brought the budget in June, staff said, hey, we really should change the path of recovery for the bridge tolls because it looked like it was doing better, and it did do better. So we thought the savings, in other words, the additional revenue of that would be $11 million. So that's what you see in the annualized value column to the right of the description. And then how does that compare to what was in the budget? Well, the budget didn't assume anything because we didn't think that would happen. So that full $11 million is also applied to the budget. And then if you see on the far right-hand side, now it says $87.2 million because it was that 98 was reduced by 11. So that's how it's going to work all the way down the page. You get a sense of it. So that change, immediate impact. The next set you see are our best estimates at this time because they all involve future actions. Our best estimates at the times are these various descriptions. The first one is transit funding revenue carryover from CARES Act funds. What that means is the district will receive the CARES Act money based on expenses it incurred in 1920 for the most part. But we won't have spent it all at that point, and that's why I said we expect it hopefully to last into the beginning of September, and maybe even longer. So right now we project that carryover to be $23.4, $23.5 million. We made this projection, which is a little bit better, and you'll see that in a later report. So hopefully, when we get our second close, because we're closing out the fiscal year, as you know, the end of the June 30th, that we'll be able to bring back to your August board meeting a slightly higher number here. Also, this number, this $23 million number, assumed that the district would receive approximately $19.5 million in second tranche CARES Act money through the MTC process. It looks like now that's going to be close to 21, or is $21.4 million. So that should increase this number by a little bit. So when we come back in August, as I said, this will be increased. And I guess that's a good time to say that, as I mentioned earlier, all of these numbers could change in a given, well, not all, almost all could change in any given month based on activities that will have taken place since we last spoke to you. And we'll go over that each month if they do change. I'll let you know. The next entry, delaying filling most vacancies, and Dennis has mentioned this several times at this committee, at the board committee meeting that we have, and we brought to the rules committee meeting an item that essentially said we were going to hold as many positions as we possibly can and not fill them. And so that's right now, based on those positions, this is the amount. If for some reason there was another position there too that came up later, this number could change, and that we held that. Does the budget assume we pay for those positions? The next line down, switch non-represented employees to CalPERS. That's something that the board looked at last month and approved, and the district is working on. That has that impact where you had a yearly, we believe for a full year it would be $350,000, but when we look at it, because it only takes place the second half of the fiscal year, it would be half that. So that's why you see that difference. Board has not approved a COLA for non-represented employees. Typically that, at this time, the budget assumed no COLA, so of course, although the board approved that there wouldn't be one, or hasn't passed one, because the budget didn't assume there was one, there's really no budget savings for that, because the budget already assumed there wouldn't be one. The next change, as you are well aware, the bus service, the bus division had a special sign-up in July, and if we take the change to that compared to what we thought was going to be in the budgeted service, and we run it through the entire year, the estimate at this point at least is that would save $8.7 million. So that's why you see that number there. And that bus budget is approximately $107 million. So it's a change to the budget, but it's
So we're losing Joe here.
Are you losing me? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, you're cutting in and out. Yeah.
Okay. Yes, please let me know if you don't hear something. I apologize for that.
Yeah, don't worry.
Okay. So the next one is
go ahead.
Current ferry service. We're looking at current ferry services. Also, as you know, about 2.5 months ago, ferry streamlined its service to just during the day, workday, and then also with significantly less trips during the workday. And that has a $6.8 million change. They have approximately a $45 million yearly budget. So that's a very significant savings on that budget. It's probably a little close to maybe twice what the bus savings we've had so far on a proportional basis. Next, the Bridge Division has done work on how it closes the bridge visiting areas, which has reduced the overtime the district had to pay, and that's a couple $100,000, and so that's on here. And the last three are well, when we have an actual month, which the first month will be, the first report will show this will be August, but it'll show you the July numbers. As we stated, the district has a projected recovery path. And if it exceeds the recovery path, then there'll be a positive savings. So if bridge toll revenue is higher than we expected, that'll be a positive number. If bridge toll is less than we expected, that'll be a negative number. And so these will change each month, and it'll be based on how the reality is actually happening. For example, the last two entries, bus and ferry, both of them right now are looking like they will trend below what the budget expected them to do. And so those numbers will likely be negative. And that will increase the amount of difference between projected revenues and projected expenses. And at that point, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Sure. Are there questions from committee members? Okay, hearing none. Joe, so as of today, roughly, we're looking at a $44 million deficit. Um, and we've got a lot of numbers coming and going, and we don't know what all will transpire. However, that is still a huge number. Are we in the process, or I should ask it a different way, I assume we're in the process of looking at other ways of cutting expenses?
Your staff is very, very much in the middle of that process. At the bus division and at the ferry division and at the bridge division and district are all looking at ways, and we expect to bring more things back to you in August and obviously also in September if the CARES Act money is actually running out, if that's what happens. Of course, we are also very closely watching what's going on in Washington, D.C. If there is a bill, and if one does get passed in the coming weeks, that may help the district extend its ability to run service without even more significant cuts. But we don't, right now, we're not planning for that. We're planning for that when the CARES Act money runs out in early September, that the district will need to make significant changes in order to balance its budget, and those would come forward to the board.
Yeah, the reason why I bring it up is it's the reality that we're dealing with, and I don't want anybody to be caught off guard. And to think that somehow we're going to be able to maybe print bridge bucks or something. We don't have access to money that way, and it's a huge deficit. And so eventually we may have to be, we may be charged with making some severe reductions here if things don't get better before they get worse. And so I just, I just want everybody to be thinking that through. So Joe, I appreciate your candor on that.
If I may, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, please.
First, thank you for saying what you just said, and we'll report every month on this. If the congressional action for the next Coronavirus Relief Act, which will probably be the fifth such act, does not include money for transit, we anticipate coming to the board in September with those very difficult decisions.
Okay, and that'll be a dark day, but we need to be ready for it. All right. Board members don't have questions. Is there anyone from the public wishing to speak on this item?
Thank you. We're going to pull the public one. We have no speakers on this item.
All righty, thank you. Well, no action is required for item 7. So moving on to item 8, we have the monthly review of Golden Gate Bridge traffic tolls and bus and ferry transit patronage fares. The staff report is on page 39, and Mr. Wire will present this item as well as 9A, revenue and expenses, which begins on page 47, and 9B, capital expenditures, which begins on page 57. Joe, you want to take us through this?
Absolutely, and please stop me if there are any questions, or of course if the audio starts bugging out again. The first thing we look at is item 8, as mentioned, and on the first page you'll notice in bold in that table at the bottom of that, in the bottom line on the right hand side, that we had 16 million, a little over 16 million vehicles. The typical year in the recent years has been 20, so we're missing almost 4 million vehicles in southbound crossing, and a really low year in a bad recession had been about 19 million, 19.1, I think. So we're about 3 million worse than even a really bad recession, and it was only for the last 3 months of the year, or 4 months of the year. So it's definitely a very significant hit for the district. Turning down 2 pages, so that would be to page 41. As a reminder, this is the end of the year, so each quarter we take a look at this sheet, which has, I know, a mind-numbing amount of numbers on it, but that's even more so because we're looking at the full 12 months. But if you have any interest in sort of knowing what's going on, how it flows through the year, this is the page for you. And the top, there's 6 boxes there. The top left band box is bridge traffic We'll take a look at that for the year. Bridge traffic is down about, as I mentioned, about 3.7, 3.8 million vehicles. That's about 18%. Because we did have toll increase, the impact, the financial impact is a little bit less percentage-wise, but it's still $27 million. And that's on the table, the box on the right, so top right. So top left is traffic, top right is the toll impact. So a drop of $27 million in fiscal year 1920. Going down to bus, which is the middle two boxes, left and right, going back to the left middle box, bus is down about 900,000 riders, and that's 27% approximately in ridership. And revenue, that's about $4.2 million in revenue that bus is down in 1920. And then the bottom two boxes are ferry, left being the patronage side. Patronage is down about 750,000 ferry riders, close to 30%, 31%, and then that's about a $6.1 million draw. If you add those three numbers up as far as the financial impact, about $37 million, and we'll see that in the next report. So if there aren't any questions on this, I would actually move us on to the next report. Stop me if there are any. And that would be page, I'll get it real quick, page 47.
Director Maston, I have a quick question.
Sure.
Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, on the bus patronage and fares, usually there's a little bit of discrepancy of 2, 3, 4%, but we're showing almost 13, 14% difference between bus patronage and fares. I can guess at a couple of possible reasons, but I thought I'd ask why such a large discrepancy compared to normal.
It's the type of trips that have dropped off the table for us. And so not all bus trips are created equally, and the longer distance trips cost a lot more, while the shorter trips are less. And also we carry people within Marin County, and we're seeing a lot of service workers traveling within Marin County for the few trips that we do have. So that contributes to the discrepancy between the drop in ridership versus the drop in revenues.
Okay.
And also, we're just in the first close, and at the year end, the closing out of those takes longer. There is a very distinct possibility that revenue number for bus for June it looks a little small. It will go up, and that would close that gap also.
Okay. Thank you very much.
So 9A, Joe?
Yeah, that was page 47. And what I wanted to point out on this first page, which is just very much a summary, is that because the CARES Act revenue is being applied against expenses that occurred during 1920, it's going to boost the revenue that we received in 1920. So the revenue, if you look down at the bottom of the page, the revenue that we received, in other words, current year actual consolidated revenues over expenses, is greater than we expected by a significant amount. Last year we were over 15 million. This time it looks like 30. That's CARES Act money. A good chunk of that money will come rolling over into the next year, and that's what will appear on that report that we just discussed as money that can be spent in the next fiscal year. In detail, if you turn 2 pages down to page 49, that page summarizes the revenues, and in that case you can see the CARES Act money. It sits in the second section from the top. If you go down, it says operating assistant in bold writing, and then the second line down is federal operating assistance. Usually we get very, very small amounts of federal operating assistance. It's something that existed 40 years ago, and we get a teeny amount to do a few projects or something. But as you see this year, we're seeing $51 million sitting there, and that's all that money from that act that came in will be recognized. And then and so that changes the revenue outlook than what we had. So although we had a very although we had a very significant revenue decrease of our own operating revenues, as you can see, and that's in the top section under operating revenues in dark. If you see total operating revenues, is about the sixth line down. That decreased by 34 million because the revenues from the federal government were up so high, they overcame that and gave us that additional boost. And then that money, of course, as I said, will be slid and is being spent now in July. It'll be spent in August. Hopefully it gets us into September. In looking at the expenses for the year, we had lower than expected expenses. Biggest change there is the districts ceasing to hire and fill positions. As you can see, there's significant revenues left over in the far right-hand column on top of that section under expenditures in salaries, fringe benefits. Then also some of the slowdown on work. We've looked at projects that we could delay under professional fees. Then fuel, significantly less fuel, over $2 million less fuel, all based on the fact that we're running less service due to the COVID situation. The other place we saw a reduction was we had fewer settlements this year than we expected in the insurance side. So overall, that at the very bottom line of that table, bottom right-hand number, $30 million, so almost 31. That'll settle out with our second close. It ought to be something similar to that from the final year. And but the majority of that will be able to be pushed over into the next year as far as funding that we'll be using to keep our service alive due to the CARES Act funding. And that will show up on the chart on item number 7. The next part of this report, there's a page for each division. And so I would answer questions on that, but otherwise I would let you look through that on your own. The other, if there's no question on that, I would move on to item 9B.
Director Maston, again, I have a question.
Yes.
On the federal operating assistance, the $51 million, does that, I assume that includes the estimate for the second tranche, is that correct?
Yes, the first tranche was 30 million, and we expect the second one to be 21 million.
Okay, so that number could change a little bit, one way or the other, possibly.
I don't think it will, but it could change a little bit, yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
You're welcome. So turning to 9B, if there are no others, and then you can always go back and ask on any of the items if you have another question. 9B, that 9A, of course, deals with operating expenses. 9B then deals with our capital expenses. What we usually look at here each year is this is not detailed by project, but is looked at sort of the overall, how is it doing from an overall financial perspective. And as you can see in the first table on the first page of that, which would be page 57 in your packet, you can see the bold number at the bottom saying total expenses, the percentages on the far right-hand side, 76%. That's pretty much what we're shooting for, 75 to 80% expenditure budget in a good capital year. We'd like to do that. Of course, we had higher than expected expenditures in Ferry because we were able to get more projects done. We had less in some of the other areas. If you can look at those percentages for the actual division. Again, that's pretty normal. Some that do a little better and some as well. In total, approximately $85 million to about a quarter, 26. That's on your pie chart, which is 3 pages later, was funded by the district directly, so through toll dollars.
Joe, we're having a little trouble hearing you again. Are you there?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Good. Okay, we'll try it again. So we had a consolidated, the revenues are about 85 million. 22 million of that was district money. The remainder was federal and state money. And I'll take any questions on 8, 9A or 9B.
Questions on those? All right. So no actions are required for items 8, 9A, 9B. Thank you, Joe, for that report. So moving on to item 10 is the fourth quarterly report of judgments or settled claims. The staff report can be found on page 63, and Attorney Madeline Chun will present the report.
Good morning, everybody. It's nice to hear your voices, even if I can't see you. We have this report, which is on page 63 of the packet. It is in accordance with the rules of the board, which requires informational quarterly reports made of cases that have been disposed of during the prior fiscal year. So this represents the great work and the great progress that has been made in closing out a number of workers' compensation cases that Kelly Vitale has been working hard to reduce the backlog for the district's open cases, and also a few general liability cases, all of which have been resolved within the delegated authority of either the general manager or with the approval of the Finance Committee. So it is an informational report. It's for your review, and happy to field any questions.
Great. Are there any questions for Madeline on the report, agenda item 10? Okay. Hearing none, I would ask if there's any public comment, and also I would say that if there's a public member who wants to comment on 9A or 9B, now would be the time as well.
Thank you. We're going to pull the public line to see if anybody wants to speak on those items. We have no speakers except for Director Cochran's squeaky chair again.
Okay.
For what? Oh, my
You
chair?
need some WD-40 up there, and
I need a new chair.
Well, all right. Okay. Thank you. So no action is required for item 10. So moving on to item 11 and 12, that's the fourth quarterly reports under the General Manager's authority on authorized budget adjustments and budget transfers, as well as procurement actions. Let's see here. I'm just looking. Oh, you know what? We need to do item 10, which is the review of the district's. No, we took care of that. I'm sorry. Scratch that. Anyway, Mr. Wire will present both of the reports. Item 11 starts on page 65, and item 12 is on page 69 of your packet, or was emailed to you separately, item 12 in particular. Mr. Wire, will you begin your presentation?
Yes, thank you very much. The first item, item 11, is the final year report for the review of the actions taken under the GM's authority, and it does include several capital expenditure, capital budget changes. They are summarized on page 68, which is the last table, which is the last page of that particular item. There were no operating revenue, operating expense changes during the year, and the ones to the capital budget were relatively minor and were taken through board action. So I'll move on to the next item. If there are any questions, of course, on that one, we can go back and discuss them. The next item is item 12, and that is the procurement activity throughout the district, and there's a summary table for that one too, and it's on this second page after. So actually, so 2 pages up, page 71, attachment A, and that summarizes the activities for the quarter and for the entire year. You can see for the entire year, there's 173 different actions that were going through their purchases, change orders, task orders, and
Chair's gone again.
Yep, I see that. I know that the committee has read the report, so
Staff is available to answer any questions that
yeah,
you might
there you
have on
go.
these two reports.
Very good. Way to jump in, Dennis. We're swimming
Sorry,
upstream
guys.
here a little bit. Any questions? Okay. Well then, hearing none, that concludes discussion on these items. But before we move on, is there anyone from the public wishing to speak on these two items?
Thank you. We'll pull the public now. We have no speakers.
Great, thank you. So there are no actions associated with items 11 and 12. At this time, we will move to item 13 on the agenda, which is a closed session. I'm going to ask Vice Chair Fredericks to do closed session, as I will be leaving the meeting. But before we do that, I want to thank everyone for being patient during today's meeting. We will be placing the public on hold for the duration of this item, and Alice will reconnect to everyone after the call and after the closed session discussion. Ms. Chun, please take us into closed session.
Yes, Chair Sobel. So we have two items for review in closed session. They are two matters of existing litigation as reflected on the agenda, and those are Edward Gormley versus Golden Gate Bridge Highway and Transportation District and Tillman Hansen versus Golden Gate Bridge Highway and Transportation District.
All right, hang on one second while we put the public line on mute. Okay, we're back in open session.
Okay, we're back in open session at 11:23 a.m. The board reviewed in closed session as permitted by the Brown Act two matters of existing litigation and provided instructions for the appropriate disposition of these matters. There's no final or formal action at this time.
Thank you. We move now to agenda item number 14, which is public comment. Is there any public comment?
We will pull the line one last time. We have no speakers.
Thank you very much. This meeting is adjourned.